today we're looking at a couple that has saved up just over $4 million for retirement. Now, they're not necessarily concerned about running out of money in retirement. They just want to make sure that they're doing things as efficiently as possible. So let's get into it. All right, so before we get into the plan, let's learn a little bit more about our couple that we'll call Mike and Laura. So Mike is 64, Laura is 62, and they live in Manitoba. So for this example, we'll be using Manitoba and federal tax rates. Now, whenever we're putting together a plan, there are certain assumptions that we need to make. So in this scenario, they are both retired, and we're using life expectancy for both of them of age 90, which might be a little bit on the high side, but we'd rather be more conservative in case they do live longer than expected. Now, whenever we're putting together a plan, we also have to make assumptions for inflation. So as we know, the cost of everything tends to go up over time. So for this example, we're using an inflation rate of 2.5%, which is slightly higher than what the long-term Bank of Canada rate is for inflation. So what's going to happen is we're going to choose an expense level, and every year that expense level is going to go up by 2.5%, just so that Mike and Laura are keeping up with the cost of living. And then lastly, they're paying external account fees. So they're paying their investment managers today about 2%, and we'll come back to that in a second. Now, there's no incomes here, so they're not doing any part-time work in retirement. So let's just jump over to their accounts. So as we'll see, we have a lot of different accounts here. So we'll start off on Mike's side of the ledger. So he has an RSP at Bank One, we'll call it, $1.2 million, and that is in an equity portfolio. So what that means is that the entire portfolio is invested in the stock market. There are no conservative investments there. Also at Bank One, he has his pension, $600,000, and that is invested in a growth portfolio. So what that means is about 80% in the stock market, 20% in more conservative investments. And then he has 3 different TFSAs at 3 different banks, and they're all invested in a balanced format. So again, that'd be about 60% stock market, 40% conservative investments. Now for Laura, also at Bank One, she has an RSP in Illyria, so $220,000 and $125,000. Again, those are in an equity portfolio, so all stock. Bank Two, spousal RSP, that is a growth portfolio, and then Bank Three and Bank Four, so she has 2 different TFSAs invested in a balanced format. Together, they have a joint account, non-registered. So today it's worth $650, cost basis about $530. So they have $120,000 capital gain there, and that is invested in a balanced portfolio. And then they also have a savings account, so strictly cash with $400,000 in it. As far as their government pensions are concerned, so again, let's start with Mike. He's already receiving his CPP, so $1,100 per month. And his plan is to start his old age security at 65, and we expect to get about $728 per month from that end. And then for Laura, also start her CPP $900 a month, and by the time she is 65, she wants to start her old age security as well. Again, with inflation, that's going to be about $765. They own their own home. It's worth $850,000, and they have no debt against it. Now, as far as their expenses are concerned, we're looking at spending $15,000 per month for, let's call it, the first 15 years of retirement. So they're doing a bit more travel. And then expenses drop to $10,000, again, starting 15 years from now until the plans end at age 90. So that $10,000 number might be a little bit high on the back end of retirement. But again, we just want to be more conservative in case they do keep traveling and are spending more than we're currently expecting today. So as far as what their plan looks like, so there are a lot of different numbers that we want to look at. The first one being is this 116%. So that means their plan is currently 116% funded, which means that on average, again, they want to spend $15,000 a month for the first, call it 15 years of retirement, then it drops down to $10,000 per month. So if you average those out all the way to the plan's end, it's about $12,700 per month. So that is their average monthly need. And their monthly ability is also 12.7. And not only that, they have a retirement cushion of 6 years. So what that means is that that money would actually last until Laura's a little bit younger. So it would last until Laura is 96 years old. For the sake of this example, we're using a rate of return of 5.41%, which again is being pretty conservative. And let's not also forget that they are paying fees of 2%. So their net rate of return after fees, which is calculated in the plan, is about 3.41%. And then we're also seeing a clawback throughout retirement for old age security of $134,000. So we'll come back to that. Now at the bottom here, we have their net worth. So as we can see in this tealish color, we have their house growing over time. We have their registered assets in dark green, TFSA in blue, and non-registered in purple. So their plan was to use up the cash that they had on hand and then their non-registered funds first in retirement before starting any withdrawals from their RSPs or their pensions or LIRAs. So as we can see, the effects of this is, we'll just use 2025 as an example. So CPP about $24,000, OAS starting from Mike, so he's getting about $5,800 for the year, and then the rest of their money is coming from their non-registered accounts. So following year, CPP is a little bit higher, again with inflation. OAS is coming in for a full year for Mike, and money again coming from the non-registered account. So this keeps happening until Mike is 72. At that point, he's forced to make withdrawals from the RSPs and the pension. So now we have minimum withdrawals of $121,000 and smaller withdrawals from the non-registered accounts. And then eventually Laura turns 71 as well and has to make withdrawals the following year. So we have more funds coming from the registered accounts. So the effects of this is that it does keep their tax bill very low for their first, call it 10 years of retirement, because they're just drawing on those non-registered accounts. But now we can see that it jumps up quite a bit once they're forced to make those mandated withdrawals. So that's when their old age security starts getting clawed back because their incomes are shooting through the roof. Income or the taxes go down eventually when their expenses go down in 2040 as well. But then we see them shoot up here at the plan's end. That's because whatever's left in the RSPs or RIFs at that point is all going to be taxable. So now that we know their situation, a few numbers that we want to keep our eye on is that their plan is 116% funded. So again, they're in no danger of running out of money, and they're leaving a net estate of $2.7 million. So what strategies can we implement to make this plan look even better? So as I mentioned, their accounts are spread out across 4 different banks currently, and the fees that they're paying are quite high at 2%. And they're paying those fees again because when you don't have all your money in one spot, you're getting, let's call it 7-Eleven pricing instead of Superstore pricing. So I would suggest to Mike and Laura to consolidate all of their accounts into one financial institution. And by doing that, their fee would probably go down quite significantly. So on a portfolio of $4 million, let's say that their fee drops down from 2% to 0.85%. So just by implementing this one change, their net worth over time goes up by $1.25 million. So those fee savings are going to be quite substantial over time. So again, it does make sense to consolidate everything. And the second thing we want to look at is to optimize their accounts. So if we go back to their different retirement accounts, currently their registered accounts, so their RSPs and pensions, are invested more aggressively than their TFSAs. So the more aggressive you invest, the higher your long-term rate of return should be. So their plan is currently backwards. We'd rather have their TFSAs be invested more aggressively because all of that growth will be tax-free. Whereas in their RSPs and pensions, yes, we want those accounts to grow. But again, any growth is eventually going to be taxed once those funds are withdrawn. So if we just flip this around and make the TFSAs more aggressive, make the registered accounts a little bit more conservative, keep their overall mix the same, it should improve their long-term outlook pretty significantly. So let's hit that strategy as well. And then we also, again, this one's pretty obvious, we want to keep topping up their TFSAs throughout retirement. Now, as far as their withdrawal strategy is concerned, so like I mentioned, they're currently, withdrawing from their non-registered accounts first, and then they're being forced to draw on their registered accounts at age 72. So we want to change this around a little bit. So what we want to do is for the first 5 years of retirement, so until 2030, we want to target an income of $101,200. So the benefit of that is that, again, in Manitoba, that's the top of the 33% tax bracket. So we don't want to go any higher than that. We start paying about 37%. So that's a pretty good number to target. And then once we start old age security, so we want to defer it to age 70, and then we just want to stay under the clawback threshold. So as we'll see, by choosing this strategy, the net worth graph is going to change pretty substantially here. We're drawing on the registered accounts much quicker. Again, we also want to delay old age security to 70 in this scenario. So we're not drawing on the non-registered accounts fully to fund their retirement. So now if we look at their retirement paycheck, CPP is still $24,000, no old age security because we've deferred that. Registered withdrawal is $130,000, and we're still drawing a bit from the non-registered. So we're being a lot more aggressive by drawing down their registered accounts. which is putting them in a position where if they do pass away earlier than expected, there's not a huge amount of money left in their RSPs or RIFs, which could be taxed at over 50%. So just by implementing these 5 changes, our net worth has increased to 4.41 million after taxes, again, up from 2.71 million. And their retirement cash flow from a cash flow perspective has increased to 136% funded, up from 116%. So needless to say, even if you have more than enough money to fund your retirement lifestyle, there might still be some room there to make your plan even more efficient, especially from a tax perspective. For all of your retirement needs, check us out at transcanadawealth.com.